The Apache girl begged to die. End it fast, but the rancher said, "Not on my land." He was on the edge of his land, checking the fence line as he usually did every evening. His boots sank slightly into the dry earth with each step, and the wind carried the scent of grass and wildflowers. It had been a long day of work, moving cattle, fixing fences, and making sure everything was in order. Life on the ranch was not easy, but it was honest, predictable, and above all, his. But that evening there was something different in the air, something that made him pause. He squinted toward the far corner of the property, near where the land sloped down into a shallow valley. At first, he thought it was a shadow cast by a tree or maybe a stray animal. But as he looked closer, he realized it was a person, a girl, lying on the ground. Her clothes were torn and dusty, her hair tangled, and her small body shook slightly. She did not move when he called out to her at first. Without hesitation, he jogged the last few steps toward her, feeling a sudden surge of concern. "Hey, are you okay?" he shouted, though his voice sounded rough in the quiet evening. She stirred slightly but did not sit up. When he reached her, he saw the full weight of her condition. Her skin was pale, her lips dry, and there was a faint trail of tears on her cheeks. She tried to speak, but only a soft, broken whisper escaped her lips. "End it, please, just end it fast," she muttered, her voice barely audible. The words hit him like a blow. He froze for a moment, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. No one had ever said something like that to him before. The girl's face was hidden partly by her hair, but the despair in her eyes was unmistakable. He felt an urgent need to act, but also a deep respect for the fragile life in front of him. "Not here. Not on my land," he said firmly, kneeling beside her. His voice was calm but unwavering, carrying a weight of authority and compassion that seemed to hang in the still air. He reached out carefully, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe here. I won't let anything happen to you." She flinched at his touch, then flopped back onto the dry grass. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into nothingness, and he realized that nothing he could say would fix the storm raging inside her mind. But he could give her something she had not had in a long time, a moment of safety, a chance to breathe, and someone who would not turn away. For several minutes, he simply sat there beside her, letting the wind carry the silence between them. The sun dipped lower and shadows stretched across the valley. In those moments, he noticed the small details, the dirt in her hair, the cuts and scrapes on her hands, the way her small chest rose and fell as she struggled to breathe. Every detail told him a story, one of pain, fear, and desperation. Slowly, he began to speak again. "You don't have to do this here," he said gently. "Whatever's happening, it doesn't have to end your life. Not now, not anywhere near me, not on my land." She looked at him then, her eyes wide and filled with disbelief. No one had spoken to her like that before. Most people had turned away, looked away, or ignored her. But here was a man, a stranger, telling her that she mattered, that her life was worth protecting, even when she felt like it was not. He helped her sit up slowly, careful not to hurt her. She leaned heavily against him, too tired to resist but not yet ready to trust. He offered her a bottle of water he had in his truck, and she took it shakily, her hands trembling as she sipped. Each gulp seemed to give her a little more strength, though the weight of her despair was far from gone. As she drank, he noticed her trembling was not just from exhaustion but from something deeper, something he could not fix with water or words alone. He understood that she was carrying more than a tired body could bear. She was carrying memories, regrets, fears, and a hopelessness that had built up over years. And yet, he also saw something small but undeniable, a flicker of life in her eyes, a tiny spark that had survived all the pain. "Do you want to tell me your name?" he asked softly, not wanting to push too hard. She hesitated, then shook her head. It doesn't matter," she whispered. "It does matter," he replied firmly. "You matter, and if you want, I can help you. You don't have to do this alone." For the first time, her eyes softened slightly. She looked at him, really looked, as if trying to decide whether he was another person who would hurt her or someone who might actually care. He could see the internal struggle, the battle between the desire to give up and the instinct to survive, flickering across her face. The rancher stood and offered his hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you somewhere safe. You can rest. You can eat. You can just breathe for a little while." She hesitated again, then slowly took his hand. It was a small act, but it felt monumental, a step away from the edge, a choice to keep moving, even if only for a moment. He helped her to her feet, steadying her as she wobbled. Her trust was fragile like glass, but it was starting to form. He led her toward his house, a simple ranch home built with care and pride. The sun had almost disappeared now, leaving a sky of deep purple and blue. The rancher knew the land well, every slope, every fence post, every familiar path. And now that same land would serve as a refuge, a place where the girl could begin to heal. Inside the house, he offered her a blanket and a chair near the fire. She sat quietly, staring into the flames, lost in thought. He prepared some food, simple but nourishing, and set it before her. She ate slowly, unsure at first, then a little faster as her body responded to the kindness and safety surrounding her. Throughout it all, the rancher said little, letting her set the pace. He knew she needed time, space, and someone who would simply be present. She began to speak in small fragments, sharing bits of her story between long silences. She had been running, she said, from a world that had hurt her in ways he could only imagine. She had been alone for so long, and now exhaustion and hopelessness had driven her to the edge. He listened, not judging, not interrupting. His presence alone became a lifeline, a reminder that someone still cared. And though the weight of her despair was heavy, he never wavered in his commitment. As long as she was on his land, she would not be left alone. Night deepened outside and the stars appeared, bright and steady. The rancher sat in a chair across from her, quietly watching over her as she rested. The land outside, vast and quiet, held them both in its calm embrace. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The world beyond the fence, the struggles she had faced, the darkness she had carried. All that mattered was this. She was safe, she was alive, and someone had refused to let her give up. By the time she finally closed her eyes, exhaustion overtaking her, a small sense of peace had begun to take root. She was still fragile, still unsure, but the first step had been taken. The rancher sat nearby, alert but calm, knowing that this was only the beginning of a long journey. The land, the ranch, and the quiet care he offered had created a space where life could continue, and perhaps, one day, hope could grow again. And though neither of them knew what the future held, one thing was certain. On this ranch, under this vast sky, she had found someone who would not let her die. Someone who had made a choice that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, the rancher woke before sunrise, as he always did, with the familiar sounds of roosters crowing and cattle stirring. He had slept only a little the night before, keeping an ear open for any sign of trouble. But when he went to check on the girl, he found her still asleep in the chair by the fire, a soft blanket draped over her small frame. Her breathing was steady now, calmer than it had been the night before, and for the first time, the rancher felt a small sense of relief. He moved quietly, not wanting to wake her, and stepped outside. The cool morning air filled his lungs as he walked toward the fence line, watching the first hints of light touch the fields and hills. The land had a quiet beauty in the early hours, and he often found peace in these moments. But today, his thoughts were not on the sunrise. They were on the girl inside, on the fragile life that had suddenly appeared on his land, and on the responsibility he now carried. By the time she woke, the rancher had prepared a simple breakfast, eggs, toast, and a cup of warm milk. He set it on the table and waited. She appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, rubbing her eyes, her hair still messy from sleep. For a moment she simply stood there, unsure of what to do, hesitant to step fully into the house that had become her refuge. "Good morning," he said softly. "Breakfast is ready if you're hungry." She nodded slowly, then walked to the table. Her movements were careful, almost tentative, as though she were testing the boundaries of this new environment. The rancher gave her a moment, letting her eat in peace. He noticed how small and delicate she looked, yet how alert her eyes were, scanning the room as if expecting something bad to happen at any moment. He understood this well. Trust did not come easily, and he would not push her. After breakfast, she did not speak much, and he did not press her. Instead, he went about his morning chores, letting her observe or stay quiet as she wished. At first, she followed him at a distance, curious but cautious, watching as he tended to the animals and checked the fences. He could see her studying him carefully, trying to understand who he was and what kind of person he might be. He did not mind her silence. Actions often spoke louder than words. By midday, the girl began to move a little closer, drawn by curiosity and a sense of safety she had not felt in a long time. She watched him feed the chickens, refill water troughs, and guide the cattle through the pasture. He noticed small details about her, how her hands trembled slightly when she reached for objects, how her eyes darted to the horizon as if expecting danger at any moment, how she flinched at sudden sounds. He recognized the signs of someone who had endured more than anyone should, and it deepened his resolve to help her. "Do you want to help?" he asked, noticing her interest. She hesitated, then nodded. I can try," she whispered. He smiled gently. "That's all I ask, just try." And so she did. Slowly, awkwardly at first, she began to help with small tasks, bringing feed to the chickens, gathering eggs, carrying water buckets. Each task seemed to give her a small sense of accomplishment, and he could see her shoulders relax slightly with each completed chore. She still did not speak much about herself, but her eyes began to shine a little brighter, the tension in her face easing. During a break in the afternoon, the rancher brought out a chair for her near the porch. "Sit for a moment," he said. "It's okay to rest." She did, and for the first time, she allowed herself to simply look around without fear. The ranch was quiet but alive. The sound of the wind through the grass, birds calling to one another, and the low hum of distant cattle created a rhythm that felt almost healing. She inhaled deeply, letting the scents of earth and grass fill her lungs, and for the first time in a long while she did not feel the urge to run or hide. The rancher sat beside her. "I know it's hard to trust," he said, his voice calm and steady, "but you're safe here. No one is going to hurt you while you're on my land." She looked at him, her eyes filled with both curiosity and doubt. "Why do you care?" she asked softly. He paused before answering, knowing that the truth mattered more than any simple explanation. "Because it's the right thing to do, because no one should feel like their life isn't worth saving, and because I've seen too many people hurt and nobody helped them. I won't let that happen again, not if I can do something." Her gaze dropped to her hands. For a long time she said nothing. Then slowly she spoke. I've been alone for a long time. No one really cared." He nodded, understanding more than she could know. "I know," he said, "and I don't expect you to believe me right away, but I'll be here. As long as you need." The day continued with small moments of connection. The rancher showed her how to mend a fence post, how to feed the animals properly, and how to move quietly through the fields without startling the cattle. She listened, watched, and occasionally asked questions. With each answer, she seemed to grow a little more confident, a little more willing to engage with the world around her. In the late afternoon, they came across a small creek running along the edge of the property. He suggested they take a short walk along it. She agreed, and together they followed the water, the sound of the creek filling the silence between them. It was peaceful, a quiet space far removed from the dangers and pain of her past. As they walked, she began to speak in fragments, telling him small pieces of her story. A village far away, a family she had lost, the loneliness that had followed her. She did not speak of the darkest moments yet, But even these small revelations were a sign of trust beginning to grow. The rancher listened carefully, never interrupting, offering a nod or a gentle word of encouragement when appropriate. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sun had dipped low, and shadows stretched across the fields. She was tired, but she also seemed lighter somehow, as if carrying the weight of her past had become slightly easier after sharing a bit of it. The rancher knew this was only the beginning, but it was a start, and sometimes a start was all that was needed. Inside the house, he prepared a warm meal, and she ate more willingly than before. For the first time, she laughed softly at something he said, a small, fragile sound but full of life. It was a sound that reminded him why he had chosen to intervene, why he had refused to let her give up the night before. There was hope here, tiny and delicate but real. After dinner, they sat by the fire. She curled up in a chair, watching the flames dance, while he tended to some chores nearby. The room was quiet, comfortable, and safe, a stark contrast to the harsh world she had been running from. And in that quiet, the rancher saw a shift in her. She was still wary, still fragile, but the walls she had built around herself were beginning to crack just enough to let someone in. He spoke gently about the land, the animals, and the routines of ranch life, careful not to overwhelm her. He wanted her to see that there was a life beyond fear, a life where she could be safe, cared for, and in time, even happy. She listened, her eyes occasionally meeting his, and he could see the faintest flicker of curiosity, an interest in life that had been buried under so much pain. Night fell, and the stars appeared in the vast sky above. The girl, tired from the day's small adventures and emotional struggles, leaned back in her chair and finally closed her eyes. The rancher sat quietly nearby, watching over her as he had promised. He knew the path ahead would not be easy. There would be moments of doubt, fear, and struggle, but for now she was safe. For now she was alive, and sometimes he thought that is all that matters. The first day had been a small victory, a step toward trust, toward healing, and toward a future that had seemed impossible the night before. He knew that the road would be long, and that helping her would require patience, kindness, and unwavering commitment. But he also knew that this was his choice, and he would not falter. She had come to his land in despair, but she would leave it stronger, ready to face a world that had once seemed cruel and unforgiving. And as he looked out at the quiet ranch under the night sky, he felt a quiet hope, a hope that in time the girl would see herself as he saw her. A life worth saving, a soul worth protecting, and a future worth fighting for. The next morning arrived with a quiet stillness, the kind that made even small sounds stand out. The clink of a bucket, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant call of a bird. The rancher woke early, as always, and noticed the girl already awake, sitting quietly on the porch steps. She stared out across the fields, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. There was a weight in her eyes, a mix of fear, sadness, and a longing that he recognized from countless years of seeing people at their lowest points. He approached her slowly, careful not to startle her. "Good morning," he said softly. She barely looked at him. "Morning," she replied quietly, her voice almost swallowed by the wind. For a while, neither spoke. He could see that her thoughts were far away, tangled up in memories and feelings that she had not yet shared. He understood that today would not be about chores, lessons, or instructions. It would be about trust, about patience, and about listening without judgment. After a few minutes, he sat beside her. "You don't have to talk if you're not ready," he said. "But when you are, I'll listen, I promise." Her eyes flicked toward him briefly, then back to the horizon. The rancher waited, giving her space. He knew that healing could not be rushed. Sometimes the first step was simply being present, simply showing that someone cared. And that was what he intended to do. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she spoke. "I don't know if anyone will ever care," she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, but the words carried a raw honesty that made the rancher's chest tighten. "I care," he said firmly. "And I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever. As long as you're here, you'll be safe. That's a promise." She looked at him then, really looked, and for a moment it seemed as if she were measuring whether he was telling the truth. Slowly she nodded, a small motion, almost imperceptible but meaningful. The day began slowly. They took their time with breakfast, sitting together quietly, eating in companionable silence. Afterward, the rancher suggested they walk to the creek again, a place where the girl had seemed to find a little peace the day before. She hesitated at first, but he waited patiently, allowing her to choose when to move. Eventually, she stood and followed him, her steps cautious but deliberate. The walk along the creek was calm. The sound of the water flowing over rocks, the birds calling in the trees, and the gentle sway of the grass created an atmosphere of quiet safety. As they walked, the rancher spoke softly about the land, its history, and the animals that lived there. He did not push her to talk about herself, but he shared stories of the ranch, of hard days and small victories, of struggles met and overcome. Gradually she began to respond, asking small questions. "Do the cows always wander like that?" she asked, pointing toward a few that had strayed near the water. "Yes," he replied. "They like to explore, but they always come back. You have to watch them carefully, but they're smart enough to know where home is." She smiled faintly at that, and he noticed how her eyes brightened just a little. Even small moments of normalcy, of observation and curiosity, seemed to give her a sense of grounding, a feeling that life could still be understood and predictable in small ways. As they reached a bend in the creek, she stopped and looked down at the water. "I used to live near water," she said quietly. "A long time ago, but it doesn't feel the same anymore." He nodded. "Water is a part of life," he said gently. "It keeps moving, even when everything else feels stuck. Sometimes it can remind us that life keeps going, even after the hardest parts." She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. "Do you really think things can get better?" she asked, her voice small. "I do," he said without hesitation. "But it takes time, and it takes someone to care, someone who won't give up on you. That's why I'm here." The girl remained quiet for a long moment, then slowly sank down onto a flat rock by the creek. She picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. It skipped once, twice, then sank beneath the surface. She watched the ripples fade, lost in thought. The rancher sat beside her, giving her space, letting her process her emotions in her own way. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to end it," she said. "I thought it would be easier for everyone. I didn't see any way out." The rancher placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I know," he said softly. "I know it feels impossible sometimes. But ending it doesn't make the pain disappear. It just leaves emptiness behind. You're stronger than you realize, and you deserve the chance to see better days. You deserve to live." She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time he saw a spark of something that had been buried for a long time, hope. Not full hope, not yet, but a flicker that refused to be extinguished. They walked back to the ranch slowly, in silence. The girl did not speak much, but her steps were steadier, her posture less hunched, her eyes less wary. Back at the house, she sat near the fire, letting herself relax a little. The rancher went about small chores, always keeping an eye on her, always present, always patient. As the afternoon wore on, she began to share more of her story in small pieces. She spoke of her village, of family members she had lost, of friends who had disappeared or turned away. She did not speak of the darkest parts yet, the moments that had driven her to the edge, but the fragments she shared were enough for the rancher to understand the depth of her pain. He listened without interrupting, offering small nods and gentle words when appropriate. He did not judge, he did not try to fix everything at once. He simply offered presence, compassion, and a safe space for her to breathe. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, the rancher suggested they check on the animals before dinner. She agreed, moving with a quiet purpose. Together they fed the chickens, refilled water troughs, and checked on the cattle. She asked questions now, showing curiosity about the animals and the land. Her voice, though still soft, carried a growing sense of confidence. By the time they returned to the house, the sky was painted with the deep reds and purples of sunset. They sat together on the porch, watching the light fade over the fields. The rancher spoke quietly about the day, praising her efforts and encouraging her to see the progress she had made, even in small ways. She looked at him and for the first time smiled. It was a small, tentative smile, but it was genuine. He smiled back, knowing that this simple moment was significant, a sign that she was beginning to trust, beginning to see that life could hold more than pain. Dinner was quiet but comfortable. She ate more than she had the previous night, and he noticed her posture had improved, her hands no longer trembling as much. They talked about ordinary things, food, chores, animals, creating a rhythm of normal life that she had not known in a long time. After dinner, the rancher suggested she help him with a small task inside the house, stacking firewood and tidying up. She agreed, and as they worked together, they laughed softly at small mistakes and shared quiet observations. These small interactions built trust, connection, and a sense of belonging. When night fell, she settled into the chair by the fire once more. She had grown more comfortable in the space, more willing to allow herself to rest. The rancher sat nearby, watching over her, knowing that the hardest moments were still ahead but confident that she had taken an important step. She had chosen to stay, even when she had once wanted to give up. He realized that today had been a turning point. She had begun to speak, to trust, and to see that life on his land could be different, safer, kinder, and more hopeful. And while the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, the first steps had been taken. She had begun to believe, even faintly, that someone cared enough to protect her, to listen, and to guide her back toward life. As he looked out at the darkening fields, the stars beginning to sparkle above, he felt a quiet sense of hope. The girl was fragile, yes, and she still carried the weight of her past. But she was also alive, breathing, and slowly beginning to see that life could offer more than despair. And sometimes, he thought, that is all that matters, the chance to give someone the time and space to choose life again. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting a warm glow across the fields. The girl was already awake, sitting on the porch steps, watching the horizon. She had slept better than the previous nights, though her eyes still carried traces of worry. The rancher noticed this immediately. He had seen progress, yes, but he also knew the world beyond the ranch was not as forgiving as the quiet land around them. Today would be another test, not only for her but for both of them. After breakfast, the rancher suggested they tend to the animals together as they had done before. She nodded quietly, following him through the fields. The morning was calm at first, with only the sounds of birds and the occasional moo of the cattle filling the air. But as they worked, the girl's attention was drawn to a distant dust cloud rising along the road that led to the ranch. She froze for a moment, uncertainty flashing across her face. "What is it?" the rancher asked, noticing her hesitation. "People," she whispered, her voice tight, "coming this way." The rancher squinted in the direction she indicated. Sure enough, a few figures appeared on the horizon, walking quickly. He did not know who they were or what they wanted, but he sensed tension in their movements. He knew that the presence of outsiders could be frightening for the girl, who had already been through so much. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. "Everything will be fine." The figures grew nearer and the girl instinctively stepped closer to the rancher. Their eyes were wary and the rancher could sense their judgment, the suspicion in their voices as they greeted him. They were neighbors and locals, some curious, others concerned. News of a young Apache girl on his land had spread and people wanted answers. The rancher remained calm. "She's safe here," he said firmly. "I'm taking care of her. That's all you need to know." The group exchanged glances. One older man stepped forward, his tone challenging. "You can't just take someone in without asking questions. Who is she? Why is she here?" "She's been through a lot," the rancher replied evenly. "And right now she needs help. That's all that matters. I won't allow her to be harmed, and I won't turn her away." The neighbors murmured among themselves, some skeptical, others understanding, but none pressed further. The rancher knew that standing his ground was necessary, not only for the girl's safety but for her sense of security. He could feel her trembling slightly at the confrontation, and he put a protective hand on her shoulder. "You see," he said softly, just for her. "No one is going to hurt you while you're here. Not now. Not ever." The girl nodded, taking comfort in his words. She realized that this man was different from everyone she had known. He would not abandon her, would not judge her, and would not allow anyone else to harm her. For the first time, she felt a small spark of strength. She was not alone anymore, and someone was willing to fight for her. After the visitors left, the rancher led her to a quiet part of the ranch, near a grove of trees where the sunlight filtered softly through the leaves. "This is your space," he said, "a place where you can be safe, where no one can disturb you. Whenever you feel scared, come here, take a breath. Remember that you're not alone." The girl sank to the ground, letting the grass cushion her small frame. She breathed deeply, trying to let go of the tension that had built up over the morning. Slowly, she began to speak, her voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. "They," she said, hesitating, "they don't understand me. They never did. They look at me like I don't matter, like I shouldn't even exist." The rancher listened carefully, nodding. "I understand," he said gently. "It's hard when people don't see who you really are, but you're not invisible here. You matter, and I won't let you forget that." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of hopelessness. They were tears of release. She had carried so much inside her, so much pain and fear, that finally letting it out felt like a small relief. The rancher sat beside her, silent but present, letting her share her heart without interruption. Over the next few hours, they talked about small things: how to care for the animals, how to plant seeds, how to notice the little details of the land. She laughed softly when she accidentally dropped a bucket of water, and he smiled in return, happy to see her enjoying a moment of simple life. These ordinary tasks, these small moments, were helping her rebuild confidence in herself and in the world around her. By midday, the girl felt ready to share more of her story. She spoke about her family, about loss, and about the long periods when she felt invisible. She spoke about the moments that had pushed her to the edge, when she had begged to die, and how alone she had felt in the world. The rancher listened, his heart heavy with understanding but steady. He did not interrupt, did not judge. He simply offered a safe space and reassurance, showing her that her experiences, as painful as they were, did not make her worthless. "You've survived so much," he said finally, "and here you are. You're stronger than you realize. You deserve to live, to feel safe, to find peace. I'll be here to help you get there every step of the way." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. When she found none, a faint smile appeared. It was fragile, but it was real. For the first time in a long time, she felt like someone believed in her, truly believed she could heal. The rest of the day passed with more chores and small lessons. She helped him repair a fence, feed the animals, and gather firewood. Each task she completed brought a small sense of accomplishment, a reminder that she could contribute, that she could be capable, that she could matter. The rancher praised her efforts gently, making sure she saw her own value. As evening approached, dark clouds gathered in the sky, hinting at a storm. The rancher suggested they finish their tasks quickly and get inside. She moved with purpose now, a stark contrast to the hesitant steps of the previous days. Together, they secured the animals and brought in tools and supplies before the first drops of rain fell. Inside, the storm raged outside, but the house was warm and safe. The girl watched the rain against the windows, feeling a strange comfort in the sound. She felt protected, knowing that no matter what happened outside, the rancher would keep her safe. "That's the thing," he said quietly, noticing her thoughts. "Life will always have storms. Some are small, some are big. But if you have a safe place, if you have someone who cares, you can weather them. You don't have to face everything alone." She nodded, letting his words sink in. Slowly, she began to realize that safety and care could exist, that life could hold moments of peace even after the hardest struggles. The storm outside became a background to the warmth inside, a reminder that the world could be harsh, but there were places and people who offered protection. By nightfall, she had grown tired but calm. She curled up by the fire, feeling the heat seep into her bones. The rancher sat nearby, reading quietly but keeping an attentive eye on her. The day had been long, filled with challenges and revelations, but it had also been a turning point. She had begun to speak, to trust, and to see that life could be different from the fear and loneliness she had known. The girl finally drifted into sleep, her body relaxed, her mind calmer than it had been in years. The rancher stayed awake a little longer, reflecting on the day. He knew the world outside could be cruel and judgmental, and that challenges were far from over. But he also knew that he had taken a stand that mattered. He had refused to let her give up, refused to turn her away, and refused to let others decide her fate. And in that choice, he had created a space where life, trust, and hope could grow. The night passed quietly, and by the next morning the girl awoke with a small but noticeable change. She moved with more confidence, spoke with a little more ease, and even laughed softly at a small mistake she made while helping with chores. These moments, though small, were monumental for her. They marked the beginning of a life chosen, not given up. The rancher watched her with quiet pride. He knew the challenges were far from over, but he also knew that she had begun to reclaim her strength. She had faced fear, confrontation, and the memories of her pain, and she had survived. More than that, she had begun to believe that someone cared enough to stand with her, to protect her, and to guide her toward a future that was still unwritten but filled with possibility. For the first time in a long while, the girl felt something she had never truly known, a sense of belonging. She was not invisible, she was not alone. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that life could be better, that she could heal, and that the world could hold kindness alongside its hardships. And the rancher, sitting quietly beside her, knew that his choice to protect her, to refuse to let her give up, had made all the difference. The morning arrived quietly, with a gentle breeze moving through the fields and the soft light of dawn spilling over the ranch. The girl was already awake, sitting on the porch and watching the sun rise. Her eyes, once filled with fear and hopelessness, now carried a subtle brightness. There was still caution in her movements, but she had changed. She had survived storms both inside and out, and she had begun to see a life beyond despair. The rancher approached her slowly, carrying 2 cups of warm tea. "Good morning," he said, offering her one. She took it with a small nod, her hand steady as she held the cup. The warmth of the tea seeped into her, bringing a quiet comfort. "Morning," she replied softly. They sat together for a while, watching the world wake up. The ranch was alive with sound, the low hum of the cattle, birds calling to each other, and the wind whispering through the grass. The girl felt a strange sense of peace in this ordinary rhythm, something she had never experienced before. It was steady, predictable, and safe, a stark contrast to the chaos and fear she had known. "Today," the rancher said, breaking the silence, "I thought we could do something different, something that isn't about chores or fences, just something to enjoy. What do you think?" She hesitated, unsure at first, then nodded. "Okay," she said quietly, a small smile tugging at her lips. They walked toward a section of the ranch where the land opened into a small meadow. Wildflowers grew in patches, their colors bright against the green grass. The rancher encouraged her to wander, to touch the flowers, and to take in the scent of the earth. She did slowly at first, but then with more confidence, letting herself notice the beauty around her. As she explored, she began to speak small things, fragments of thoughts she hadn't shared before. "I remember flowers like this near my home," she said softly. "But they don't look the same anymore. Not after everything." The rancher nodded. "Sometimes things look different after hard times, but beauty is still there even if it takes time to notice." She paused, looking at the blooms and then at him. "I think I want to notice again," she whispered. It was a small declaration, but it carried weight. She was beginning to choose life, to allow herself to see the world not just through fear and pain, but through curiosity and hope. The rancher smiled quietly, knowing that these small steps were monumental. The rest of the day was filled with simple joys, gathering herbs from the meadow, watching the animals, and even attempting to feed some of the younger calves. She laughed when a small calf nudged her too hard, spilling a bucket of feed. The sound was light and genuine, a sound the rancher had not heard from her before. It was the sound of life returning, of trust forming, and of joy beginning to take root in a heart that had long been closed. As the afternoon wore on, they returned to the house. The girl helped him prepare a meal, chopping vegetables and stirring the pot with careful attention. She spoke more freely now, asking questions about the ranch, the animals, and even the rancher's life. Each question, each word, showed a growing confidence and a willingness to connect. After dinner, the girl stepped outside for a moment, looking up at the sky. The stars were bright, scattered across the deep blue canvas of night. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of possibility, of a future that was not defined by fear or despair. The rancher joined her, standing silently beside her. "You're doing well," he said quietly. "I can see it, you're choosing life little by little." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. I didn't think I could," she admitted, "but I think I can now." "That's all I ever wanted for you," he replied, "to see that you can. To see that your life has value, that you have strength inside you that you might not even know about yet." She nodded, letting his words sink in. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe them, to see herself as someone who mattered, someone capable, someone alive. The weight she had carried for so long, the hopelessness, the fear, the desire to give up, was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had begun to reclaim it piece by piece. Over the next few days, the rancher helped her practice daily routines that built her confidence. She learned to tend the animals alone, to carry water without fear of spilling, and to notice the small rhythms of life on the ranch. She also began to speak more about her past, sharing memories and experiences that had once seemed unbearable. Each story, each revelation was met with patience, understanding, and compassion. Slowly, the girl began to dream again. She spoke of things she wanted to do, places she wanted to visit, and people she wanted to see. Even small dreams, a garden she wanted to plant, a calf she wanted to name, were signs of her growing sense of hope and purpose. The rancher encouraged these dreams, showing her that life could be full of small victories, joys, and accomplishments. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the girl sat on the porch with the rancher. She watched the light fade over the fields, feeling a sense of gratitude she had never felt before. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for not letting me give up, for keeping me safe." The rancher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I did what anyone should do, but I'm glad you see that your life is worth protecting. That's the most important thing." She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. The weight of the past, though still present, felt lighter now. She had learned that it was possible to survive, to heal, and to trust again. The rancher had shown her that life could be lived with hope, even after the darkest moments. In the following weeks, she grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. She began to explore the ranch on her own, tending the animals, helping with chores, and even planting a small garden near the house. Each accomplishment built her confidence and reminded her that she had control over her own life, that she could make choices and take action, and that she could create a future worth living. The rancher continued to guide her, offering support without judgment. He taught her not only about ranch life, but also about resilience, kindness, and the importance of standing up for oneself. He showed her that life could be difficult, yes, but it could also be beautiful, full of connection, and full of moments that reminded her of her own strength. One afternoon, as they walked along the fence line, the girl stopped and looked out over the fields. I think I'm ready," she said quietly. The rancher glanced at her. "Ready for what?" "To face the world again," she said. "To go back not the same as before, but stronger, to not let fear control me anymore." He nodded, pride and warmth filling him. "You can do it," he said. "And remember, you're never alone. You can always come back here if you need. This land, this home, will always be a place of safety for you." Tears filled her eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, relief, and newfound strength. I will remember," she whispered. In the days that followed, she began to take small steps toward independence. She visited nearby communities, spoke with others, and slowly rebuilt connections that had been broken by fear and pain. Each step was guided by the lessons she had learned on the ranch, the value of patience, trust, and courage. She faced challenges and moments of doubt, but she met them with the resilience she had discovered within herself. Eventually, the time came for her to leave the ranch for longer periods, to test her strength in the world beyond its fences. She hugged the rancher tightly, feeling the support and protection he had offered her for so long. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steady now. "For saving me, for teaching me to live." The rancher smiled, his heart full. "You saved yourself," he said softly. "I just helped you see it. Now go and show the world how strong you really are." As she walked away, her steps were confident, her posture straight, her eyes bright. She had chosen life, reclaimed her strength, and discovered hope in a world that had once seemed dark and impossible. And though the path ahead would have challenges, she knew she could face them, carrying with her the lessons of trust, compassion, and courage that had been taught on the ranch. And the rancher watched her go, knowing that the decision he had made, to refuse to let her give up, had changed both of their lives forever. On his land, under the wide sky, a young girl had found the courage to live, to hope, and to believe in herself once more. And sometimes, he thought, that is all anyone can truly ask for.